a company asks for loyalty but fires you in the ICU, you learn just how much your signature is worth and who you can trust when the machines start beeping. My name is Sam Turner. I'm 56, and for the last 20 years, I was the guy in the lab coat they sent in when everything else failed. Vice President of Engineering Systems at Medicor, maker of the monitors that keep a patient's heart on the screen, and sometimes, if we did our job right, keep them alive a little longer. My name sits on 2 patents for non-invasive biosensors, tech that's licensed by hospitals across the country. My friends say I spent more nights in server rooms than at home, but the truth is, I believed in the mission, make something that mattered and protect the people who built it with me. So, when I landed in the ICU, cancer surgery behind me, lines taped to both arms, I thought, for once, it was my turn to be the patient. My wife sat at my bedside, brave smile, telling me the worst was over. That's when my phone chimed. Even on morphine, I recognized the tone. Urgent, work email, flagged, confidential. I opened it, expecting flowers or a get well soon. Instead, in black and white, Sam, due to corporate restructuring, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Please review the attached documents for separation terms. Wishing you a swift recovery. Ed, CEO. That's not just cold, that's calculated. Seconds later, a ping from HR, separation paperwork. Reply with digital signature. No mention of my equity, no word about my long-term stock grant that was supposed to vest at midnight, today. The number I'd watched crawl up year after year, payment for the risk and sweat, now just a shadow on an Excel file. Then another ping, hospital billing. Coverage declined, insurance terminated, non-employee. The digital knife twisted. I glanced at my wife, her face going pale as she read over my shoulder. Sam, can they do this? I swallowed, forced a slow breath. Not if I have anything to say about it. Even flat on my back, I went to work. My hands shook, but old habits kicked in. I unlocked my phone, navigated to my encrypted archive, pulled up my employment contract, thank God for paranoid backups. Clause 4.3, plain as day. Termination for medical leave requires independent committee approval. I took a photo of the CEO's email on my hospital screen, texted it to my attorney, and blind copied Olivia from the board. I was always methodical, but now my survival, and my family's, literally depended on it. My patent licenses were next. Before surgery, I'd transferred control of both core sensors into a family trust. The clause was simple. If Medicor ever tried to cut me loose, not for cause, their license would dissolve after 14 days. The CEO's shortcut wasn't just ruthless, it was self-sabotage. I emailed the trust's attorney. Trigger notification. If I'm not reinstated, rescind license. Clock starts now. Minutes later, Helen, my assistant for more than a decade, answered my coded message with a simple, file released if needed. That file, a digital dossier, FDA audit docs, and a record of every time Ed, the CEO, had signed off on a test result he knew was incomplete, was now in the audit committee's inbox with a backup in the hands of a national medtech journalist if anything happened to me. You don't spend 20 years building a safety net without weaving in a few tripwires. Nurses came and went, but my mind was running every possible scenario. I had Mike, CTO, on speed dial. I pinged him. Heads up, CEO just pulled the trigger on me. Need you in QA on record. Product launch can't proceed without sensor patents. He replied in minutes. Already on it. 3 engineers and QA signed a joint statement. No go without your oversight. I felt a flicker of hope, sharper than any drug. By the time the morphine wore off, the first tremors were reaching the board. Olivia called me directly, whispering so quietly I could barely hear her over the ICU hum. Sam, what's going on? The chair just got a notice from your trust lawyer. HR is in a panic. I filled her in, piece by piece, never letting my voice waver. If they want the new device to launch, they fix this. No shortcuts. Within 24 hours, the press caught wind. A headline appeared on MedTech Review. VP fired in ICU, company risks patent loss. Share price tumbled 5%. Our biggest clients, the hospital chains that license my sensors, sent anxious emails to procurement. We need written assurance, patents secure, no regulatory exposure. At the same time, the FDA's pre-approval audit request landed on Medicorp's desk, asking for clarification regarding senior technical oversight. A shot across the bow. My backup file did its job. The CEO tried to spin it. Routine restructuring, unfortunate timing. But you can't bury a body in an age of cloud backups. Board members started calling each other, then calling me. Olivia let me know. There's going to be a closed session. You'll get a vote, Sam. Hang tight. From my hospital bed, I watched it unfold like a chess match. Every email, every call, every threat and promise. I wrote notes for my wife, where to find the files, which numbers to call just in case. I recorded a message for my kids. When someone tells you people are replaceable, remember that even the smallest part can crash the whole system if you pull it at the wrong time. Within 3 days, Ed, the CEO, was summoned to a board meeting he couldn't control. HR was told to freeze all terminations and review irregularities. The audit committee started examining every document tied to the new device's clinical data, and Ed's signature was on the ones with discrepancies. When you move fast and break things in medicine, people bleed, and this time, it wasn't going to be swept under the rug. 2 weeks later, as my wounds were healing and I was practicing walking the hallways again, the board made it official. I was reinstated, not just as vice president, but as chief innovation officer, with direct oversight of all clinical launches. My insurance was restored, my stock grant vested, and Ed retired for personal reasons, just ahead of a formal audit. HR leadership quietly changed hands. My patents were relicensed, with a clause that gave my family's trust even more say in future decisions. 6 months out, the new generation of monitors went live under my supervision. FDA approval sailing through with no findings. Share price rebounded, staff morale too. My ICU lessons folder, with that original photo of Ed's email, stayed in my encrypted archive. A reminder that sometimes your real value isn't in the code or the hardware, but in the principles you refuse to compromise, even when your world is hanging by a thread. When people ask what I learned, I tell them, a company can own your badge, but it never owns your backbone. And if leadership forgets that people are the real tech, they'll crash harder than any machine. You think, lying in an ICU bed, that the outside world might slow down. It doesn't. It simply passes you by, pretending you never existed. The first 3 days after the email blur together. Nurses with soft voices and cold hands, beeping monitors, the sterile scent of disinfectant settling in the back of my throat. My wife, Maria, never leaves, except for a quick shower and to check her own messages. She runs ops for a local clinic and knows better than most how precarious health can be, and how quickly a safety net unravels. I spent those hours replaying the choices that got me here, and not just the medical ones. When I was first recruited to Medicorp, the company was a ragtag team working out of a repurposed warehouse on the edge of Boulder. The first day, I asked my would-be boss what counted as success. No recalls, no lawsuits, and if you ever lose a patient, you damn well know why. Back then, the CEO was an engineer too. She'd lost a brother to a faulty O2 monitor. Every meeting, she'd bang her fist on the table. Lives first, profit after. But over 2 decades, as we grew, something shifted. First came the private equity partners, then the quarterly reviews, the optimization consultants, the executive coaches who promised alignment with modern efficiency metrics. Our latest CEO, Ed, was MBA all the way. Suits, slogans, and a habit of turning mission into a branding exercise. I remember the first real fracture, 5 years ago, when we tried to pivot to cloud patient analytics. Ed wanted us to ship early, before clinical validation. I stood my ground, even threatened to walk. We're not launching until the failure rate is under 0.02%. For a week, I was public enemy number one. Then the board caved, after I showed them just how much a single wrongful death lawsuit could cost. I didn't make friends, but I did make a mark. People started coming to me quietly with their worries, their mistakes, their ideas. I took it seriously. Every shortcut leaves a scar somewhere. It's your job to make sure it doesn't end up on a patient. Now, lying there with a new scar snaking across my stomach, I wondered how many shortcuts Ed had taken, how many he'd hidden from the board, from me, from the world. Maria must have seen the look on my face. She squeezed my hand. "You're still the guy who puts people first, Sam. That's what they can't fire." My attorney, Lisa, called that afternoon, voice cool and precise. "Sam, I've started the clock. The board has 2 weeks, or they lose your patents for good. And by the way, your insurance provider has confirmed as long as you were terminated in the hospital and without committee approval, your coverage stands. Any attempt to revoke it is bad faith and grounds for punitive damages." I actually laughed, the first real laugh since surgery. "So, what you're telling me is, they just tried to save money by breaking the law and picked the worst possible target." "That's about the size of it," she said. I thought about the years, the projects, the birthdays missed, the late nights spent tuning algorithms in windowless labs. I thought about my kids, now grown, both in college, one studying biomedical engineering, the other journalism. I'd always hoped they'd learn from my best qualities and forgive the worst. If I could give them one thing, it would be the lesson I was learning now. Never let anyone convince you that decency is a weakness. Sometimes it's the sharpest tool you have. The days crawled by, each one another chess move. Mike, CTO, texted updates. Board split 4-3. Audit findings are ugly. HR is lawyering up. Stock still falling. Helen, my assistant, forwarded me a screenshot from an anonymous employee Slack channel. If they can dump Sam in the ICU, what happens to the rest of us? The mood was turning. I'd seen it before, the slow, cold withdrawal of faith in leadership, the silent exodus of talent. Good people never leave first. They wait, they watch, and when they do go, they take the soul of a company with them. On the 5th night, as the hospital's outside lights flickered across the ceiling, I remembered a story my old boss once told me. There are 2 kinds of engineers, the ones who write the manual and the ones who rewrite it when the system breaks. I never wanted to rewrite this story, but if Ed wanted a fight, he'd pick the wrong person to count out. I started making my own list. People I could trust, people I needed to warn, people I hoped to protect. Maria helped, reading out names as I typed, her fingers brushing mine when my hands shook too much to finish a line. "You built this place, Sam. They can't just erase that with a click," she said. On day 6, Olivia from the board called again. "Sam, be ready. Emergency session tomorrow. They're going to want your statement, and the audit committee is ready to drop the hammer." She paused. "Do you want me to send a car?" I smiled, then grimaced. Too soon after surgery. "I'll do it remote, in a tie and pajama pants, but I'll be ready." I barely slept that night, running through every scenario. Ed fighting back, HR spinning a new story, the board caving, the press moving on. I had one trump card left, the truth, in 1,000 tiny pieces, each one impossible to refute, and a simple promise I'd made to myself. If you're ever asked to stand up for what's right, stand up, even if it's from a hospital bed. The morning of the board session dawned gray, filtered sunlight crawling across the linoleum tiles. Maria left early to pick up my favorite coffee, something normal in a day built out of unknowns. I spent the hour rehearsing, not just the points of law and contract, but the moral calculus, the history, the stakes. The The kind of clarity that comes only when you've already lost everything that can be taken and realize what you have left is yours alone. Your name, your record, your truth. Lisa patched me in by video. My face, washed out and drawn, flickered onto a wall of board members, some familiar, some new, since the last time I'd sat at that table in person. Ed wasn't present, which told me more than any speech could. His absence wasn't an accident. It was self-preservation. The chairman, Dr. Ross, opened in a voice as brittle as the Denver air in January. "Mr. Morgan, thank you for joining us under challenging circumstances." I nodded. "Thank you, Doctor. Ross." I would have preferred the old boardroom, but this will do. They let me speak first. I started not with my contracts or my patents, but with the founding story, how we'd built Medicore to protect lives, not just to maximize share price. I reminded them of the faces behind the data, the infants whose first breaths were measured by our monitors, the cardiac patients whose families sent us thank you notes after a good night's sleep. In the end, I said, technology is only as good as the people who stand behind it. If you sacrifice those people, you sacrifice everything. I laid out the facts, the letter from Ed, the HR summary, the timeline of my surgery and termination, the patent transfer documents, the trust's built-in triggers, the contract clause in plain English. No executive or key patent holder may be terminated due to medical incapacity without the approval of the Independent Oversight Committee. I scrolled through scanned PDFs, emails, text message time stamps, leaving nothing to speculation, nothing to PR spin. Ross looked like he'd swallowed glass. He cleared his throat. "Sam, are you alleging your termination was in direct violation of board policy?" My voice was steady, almost cold. "I'm not alleging, Doctor. Ross, I'm providing proof." Lisa took over, walking them through the legal implications. Breach of fiduciary duty, bad faith, violation of corporate bylaws, exposure to shareholder lawsuits, even possible grounds for criminal fraud if the FDA audit documents were found doctored. You can recover now, or you can bleed out over a dozen lawsuits in a media storm, but you can't have it both ways. The meeting turned. Suddenly the boardroom air felt brittle, heavy with a sense of reckoning. Ross thanked me, said they'd need a short executive session. "You'll hear from us by close of business." The video blinked out. Maria came back with coffee and a small, tired smile. "You look like you just won something." "Maybe I did," I said, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Those hours stretched on, my phone buzzing with anxious messages from Mike, Helen, half my old team. "Any word? You okay?" I answered everyone, even when it hurt to type. "Hang tight. Whatever happens, we take care of each other." By mid-afternoon, the answer came, a call from Ross himself, voice lower, softer now. "Sam, the board voted. Ed is on leave pending investigation. You're reinstated, full compensation, title of Chief Innovation Officer. We want you leading the FDA response. And, Sam, we're sorry." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I looked at Maria, mouthed the words. She teared up, relief and exhaustion in equal measure. But the fight wasn't over. That week, news broke on MedTech Watch. Medicore ousts, CEO amid audit scandal, board restores key exec. The industry press went wild. Orders, frozen for days, began to move again. My inbox flooded with congratulations, but also with questions. Lawyers, reporters, former rivals, all wanting the inside scoop, or a quote, or a lead. I deflected the worst, answered the ones that mattered. To my team, I wrote a long, late-night email. What we do matters. How we do it matters more. We survive because we trusted the truth, not just our tech. Let's build back better. No shortcuts, no easy answers, and never at someone else's expense. At my first video meeting back, Helen asked if I had any advice for the next generation. I thought for a long moment before answering. Never confuse compliance with ethics. Sometimes the line is legal, sometimes it's just right. You'll know which is which when you have to risk something to defend it. When my 6-month scan came back clear, I brought the photo of Ed's email, still sharp, still damning, to my office and taped it inside my notebook. A memento, a warning, a badge. In my new role, I set up an anonymous feedback channel and started regular Ask Me Anything sessions with every team. The innovation pipeline grew. FDA approval came through. No findings, no footnotes. Share price rebounded, but more than that, people started to trust the company again. Sometimes I wonder if I would change anything. The pain, the fear, the anger, none of that was worth the lesson. But the lesson itself, priceless. The most advanced system in the world is still only as honest as the people who build it. Never forget which is more important.